Well, folks, welcome back to the Frontier Western Heritage channel. I'm Todd Kessner, and today we're going to take a look at the 1851 Navy Colt and try 3 different rounds through this revolver this time around. I'm going to start out with a round ball, and we'll go through the loading sequence since I haven't done this particular video before with loading a black powder revolver, but we'll start with a round ball, and then we'll go to a loose powder and conical and give that a try, see if there's a difference there with accuracy. And then we'll go to the paper cartridges that, if you watched the making paper cartridges video this last winter, you would have seen how these things were put together, and we'll try a package of these as well and see which one we like the most. So first of all, I want to talk real quick about the 1851 Navy Colt. This is a Uberti import from Cimarron, and pretty historically correct in the way that it's put together. Awfully darn close. To me, it's one of the better balanced revolvers, black powder revolvers that Colt ever made. It just feels natural when you point this particular revolver, and just like the feel of it. And if you followed any of the Colt history in your own reading or watching videos and things, you'd know that the earlier guns were much bigger. Of course, he came out with a Patterson in 1836 that was a 5-shot. The biggest one out of that group was a 5-shot 36 caliber, and it's actually about this size, only with a 9-inch barrel. This one has a 7.5, so pretty similar in size. But then went up to the Walker, which was a gigantic pistol that weighed about 5 pounds loaded, and 44 caliber, 6 shots, great big cylinder. And part of the reason for the bulk of the gun is that the steel at the time was more iron than steel, and so it needed a lot of bulk to hold that. And after the success of that big revolver, what folks are looking for is something they could carry on their belt. And the big military Dragoons, the Walker and the Dragoons that came later, were primarily carried in pommel holsters on your saddle, and were horse pistols, really. And that term refers to a gun that you would carry on your horse because it was really uncomfortable and heavy to carry on your person. So when Colt came out with the 1851 Navy, it was actually labeled a belt pistol. It caught on very quickly, and it came out at about 1850 with the 1849 pocket. And so the 1849 pocket is a smaller version of the 51 Navy. They called one the 49, they called one the 51, or at least we do today to separate them. It's for collectors. And both of them came out about the same time in 1850. So we're going to give this a try. It's 36 caliber. We'll load up about 20 grains. What I've got here is Old Eynsford, and that's what I used when I made the paper cartridges, so I wanted to stay consistent with that. Load up about 20 grains of Old Eynsford. We'll start with the round ball and put a little lube over the top after we get the powder and ball in, and then I've got number 11 CCI percussion caps, and we'll see where the round ball goes, and then we will compare that to the loose conical and then the paper cartridge conical. So stay with us, and we'll be right back with the loading sequence. So we're going to start the loading process on the 1851 Navy Colt here, and I've got my powder measurer set for 20 grains. And one thing I wanted to remember to say is, a few times seldom, but a few times, I've seen folks out at the range and they're playing around with the black powder revolver, and unfortunately almost treating it like a toy. And I know that they're an old-fashioned gun. I know they don't have the respect that a modern gun has, but believe me, it's a very capable of doing harm. And so when you're working with one of these, just remember, it is a real firearm. It's not a cap gun. Most people realize that. A few people don't seem to. They treat it, like I said, almost like it's a toy, or it just doesn't have any power. But it's got a tremendous amount of power. And if you know there was 600 and some thousand dead folks during the Civil War, you know that these and other old-fashioned firearms definitely are lethal, and you've got to treat them like a regular, any cartridge gun that you might have. So one of the first steps that I would urge anyone not to skip this step, and I've got the Old Eynsford 3F powder in here, so I'm going to fill up this spout, and I'm not going to go directly to the gun. I'm going to go to a powder measure and top this off just a hair over 20 grains, because that's what I used in the paper cartridges, and load this up from the powder flask. And let's get it coming here. There we go. Get it close to the top. and then use my, put this on half cock, and use my powder measure then to put in my load. And there's my 20 grains, and before I forget which chamber I loaded, I'm going to put a ball on it and go ahead and ram that in, and then go to my next chamber. Now, the reason that it's critical, there you go, get that seated. The reason it's critical to use the powder measure as a step in between your flask is because even though these spouts come with a measured spout, so you can get them in 20 grains, 30 grains, 25 grains, and you could put your finger on it, fill it up, and dump it in the gun. The issue with that, this is the first time today we're loading this cylinder, so all the chambers are clear. The issue with that is if you're reloading, if there's ever a little ember in there that was burning and this went off while you were pouring from this particular spout, you're hanging on to a pretty good chunk of powder here, and you're going to lose your fingers, if not your whole hand, and even worse. So I would urge you, don't ever skip the step of going from your main powder flask to your measurer and then to your gun. If something goes off while I'm pouring in 20 grains, I'm going to get burned. If something goes off while I'm pouring 20 grains from here, I'm probably going to be losing some fingers. So I urge you to not use the measured spout directly into the gun. The other thing is, these are 380 balls, and so I'm shooting a pretty good sized ball out of this revolver, out of a 36 caliber revolver. And when you put these things down in, they're much bigger than the chamber, and you get a nice ring of lead that shaves off because this ball is basically pressure fitted down into this chamber. So if you can see that ring of lead that's coming up with the rammer, that's a very good sign that we have a circle that's complete all the way around, that would leave no gaps between the ball and the chamber wall that would let a spark get in there. So a lot of folks worry about chain fires, and that's when more than one chamber goes off at once by accident, and you fire one and the chamber next to it, or even several of them, go off at once. And I found anyway that normally that happens from the back. That happens from the nipple in the rear, that you don't have a good fitting cap. But if you have a chamber that's a little bit out of round, and when these things are machined, the drill goes in, and if there's a little bit of walking in the drill, you can make this thing a little bit out of round, and if that happens, you could have a bit of a gap between the ball and the chamber wall, and you could get a chain fire from the front. So a ring of lead with a ball that's big enough to completely fill that chamber is definitely a key to not having anything go past that ball. The other thing that'll stop it, and we'll do that in a minute, is the lubrication. So there's one chamber. So I'll go ahead and load the next chamber here, and again from the powder measure, put the ball in, and eventually here get all 6 of them loaded. Let's do one more on film. Again, I've got a spout here that actually holds 30 grains, but I'm going to pour it into a 20 grain powder measure so that I don't run out on my spout here. Had plenty to get in the gun, and we're going to put that back down into the chamber here. And I've got round balls that are cast round balls, and so you can see that you've got the front on it, the sprue. So we're going to put the sprue directly forward because we know that the front of the bullet doesn't affect accuracy anywhere near like the rear of the bullet does. And maybe that's true with the round ball as well. That's been the common practice anyway, is put that sprue forward. So I got that in. We'll put another one down, seat this nice and tight. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the other 4, and we'll talk about lubrication and putting the caps on. So I had talked about the possibility of a chain fire from the front if the ball and the chamber wall has any gap between it. And the way to seal that off for sure is to take the bullet lube, much like what we dipped these paper cartridges into, the bullet portion of the paper cartridges into, and smear that right over the front of each chamber. And so what that'll do for us, it'll provide some lubrication to keep the fouling soft, and it also seals the front so that we've reduced or nearly eliminated the chance of of a chain fire coming from the front of the revolver. So a lot of different schools of thought on this. If you read the old Colt instructions, which are available in some books and sometimes you can find them online, the very first instructions from Colt were to just put in powder and then a ball and then throw your cap on top, and that was all there was to it. There wasn't even any mention of bullet lube at all. But as people got using these and experimenting with them and getting them a little bit more accurate and shooting them more than just one cylinder full, and reloading and shooting them again, and then finding out how to really determine how to take care of the fouling issue, then lube became very, very important as part of the process, even though the original Colt instructions were just to put in the powder, the ball, and shoot it. There is a mention in some of those instructions, we'll do a video on that, there's a mention in some of those instructions about a washer wad, they call it in the instructions, and so I'm guessing it's a felt wad that's even hollow in the middle like a donut, like a washer, but I'm not sure. I haven't never seen one for sure from that era, but it talks about putting in the powder and then the washer wad and then the ball on top of that, but that's the only mention of a wad, and that came later in later instructions. So if hopefully you can see this on the film, what I've done here is covered the front of each of these chambers with our bullet lube that not only seals that chamber from a potential chain fire, but also provides lubrication for the bullet to keep the powder soft. So we're getting really close to having a gun that's ready to fire. I'm going to switch over to dropping in the percussion caps, and then we'll be ready to test this thing. So I'm putting on their percussion caps. I've got CCI number 11. Seemed to work really well for me, and didn't remember my cap tool, so I'm just doing them by hand. One thing that is a little bit different about this gun is that I went to Track of the Wolf and purchased some caps that, or excuse me, some nipples that have a more straight cone to them, and it's a little bit more like the original Colt nipple that would have come with an 1851 Navy during its actual use in the 1850s. And so I'm hoping that this straight-walled cone here keeps us from losing our caps as easy when you pull the hammer back for the next round. And it's called cap sucking. Hopefully it doesn't suck the caps as much if I'm using this. We will see. Hopefully it's not going to cause that kind of an issue. But I like the idea of having these straight-walled cones, particularly since the really straight funnel-shaped, cone-shaped cones really give you a little bit of trouble with different kinds of caps, and so you try to get those on there, and when you're pushing them on there, you don't know if you got them all the way out of the way for the cylinder to turn. Some caps fit deeper than others, and I've even have a friend who's got a gun that he has to shoot it once, drop the hammer once all the way around to pretty much put the cap where it's supposed to be, and no amount of pushing it from an angle gets it done. And the second time around the chamber or around the cylinder, then it goes off. And so to avoid that, you'd rather have it go off the first time around. So to avoid that, hopefully these nipples will do the trick. I've got one hanging up here, but we'll be able to get past that. And I did go ahead and load 6. You do know if you compete in any kind of a Western action shooting contest with a cap and ball revolver that you would shoot 5. I went ahead and loaded 6. One neat thing about a Colt revolver is right between, see if we can get a shot right down in there, right in between each of these chambers, get this thing back on half cock, there we go, is what they call a safety pin. And that safety pin is a little protrusion coming out of the back of the chamber, or between the chambers, and then there's a notch in the hammer, and that hammer notch falls down on top of that safety pin, and then your cylinder is not going to move. So you don't necessarily have to load 5 and put it down on an empty. You could do it like the folks did during the period, which was load 6 and put it on that pin. after having watched the loading process of this, or at least you caught a part of it, I didn't film or didn't show the entire thing, you would realize how important that 6-shot could be compared to having to reload the gun. So they would have more than likely used the safety pin in the 1850s, put the hammer down on that safety pin and had that extra 6-shot rather than having 5 shots in an empty. So that's the way I loaded it. I loaded it a little more historically correct instead of competitively correct. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Let's take a look at this target and drop 6 rounds into this thing and see where we're at. All right, let's give our 6 shots a try here. Most cap and ball revolvers are notorious at shooting very, very high, so I'm going to try to hold at the bottom of the steel circle, and let's see where we end up. Wrap off 6 shots, and then we'll compare it to a conical bullet and then the paper cartridge. Yeah, well, it looks like I dropped a cap off of one of these cones here, and now I'm trying to figure out which one it is without looking where I shouldn't. So let me figure this out. We'll get rid of this last shot, and then we'll go to the conical bullet. Well, we've got a bit of a mystery here. I took the cylinder out to try to figure out where that 6-shot was, and maybe re-grease it and put a cap on, and all 6 of my chambers are empty. So I know I fired 5. I thought I loaded 6. I didn't feel or see on the camera a chain fire, so I don't know. There's one after one of the shots you can hear something. Can't see it, but I can hear something drop. So I'm wondering if a ball just fell out the front. I'm puzzled. I don't know. So I'm going to have to watch this film very, very carefully on a bigger screen and see what happened to that 6-shot. And it was odd. I had 6 caps on. I thought I had 6 chambers loaded. I got to that 6th chamber, had neither a cap nor a charge. So yeah, I'll have to figure this out as we go. Hopefully when we do the editing on this, I can point that out. So it's odd that I would have lost a ball. None of that's ever happened before, and never had chain fire before either. So we'll see which one it is, or I just forgot and loaded 5. I don't know. Sometimes you get yourself on camera and you kind of lose your place a little bit too. So yeah, we'll find out. We'll solve that mystery soon. But in the meantime, I'm going to just run a patch down this barrel so that we're kind of having the same, as near as we can get, the same conditions for our conical as we had for our ball, so that we're not plowing through extra fouling and really throwing that whole sequence off. I was pretty pleased actually with the 5 that did end up out there. I was pretty pleased with the grouping. Not quite offhand. I got an elbow on the bench, but I was still pretty pleased with the grouping. And looks like it shoots a little bit to the right, but not as high as I thought it was going to. So that's kind of good news. So we'll see what the conicals do. Repainted the target. We'll see what the conicals do. Hopefully I'll load 6 and shoot 6, and then we'll take a look at the very last one, will be the paper cartridge. Well, I'm going to load the conicals loosely here with powder and then the conical on, and so it's the same sequence that we had with the round ball. And use my powder measurer here. Drop it in the chamber. Same powder charge, a little over 20 grains, about 22 grains. And this particular bullet's got a heel at the bottom, so it's really a nice bullet to use on cap and balls, and some bullets will come without the heel, and this one sets in there really nicely and gets all lined up for you to pull down the loading lever and ram it into position. So that's pretty handy. Some of the bullets that don't have that heel are kind of hard to get centered, and they want to twist off on you, but this makes it really easy. So I've got a lube grease groove in these, and we lube these, pan lube these if you watch the pan lubing video. So I'm going to see how they do with just the grease groove, as if they were a bullet in a cartridge that would have a grease groove, and not put anything over the front, but instead just let that grease do its job, that lube do its job that's already in there. So I'm going to go ahead and load up 6 of these things, and we'll put on our caps here in a minute and try this once again. All right, I'm down to my 6th bullet. This is a 126 grain conical that comes out of a years gone bullet mold. It's the Colt bullet mold that they have reproduced. And what I really like about that particular company is that they have researched the bullets and are actually offering exactly what you would have had in the contemporary time the pistol was in action. And so a lot of them are Civil War pickups off of battlefields and things. And so I got a 126 grain conical. This is the last one. I got 5 loaded. This will be the 6th one. And again, it's got this heeled base, which was extremely helpful in getting this into the chamber mouth and then square with the chamber mouth. So I'm going to turn this to the side. And if we take a closer look at that, you'll see that it just fits right in here, nice and square, which makes it really easy to load. I've been really pleased with how easy these things load, and lines itself up for the rammer, and seats itself very, very well. I've got about 22 grains of powder in here, and I really couldn't do a whole lot more because the conical is longer than the round ball, and I would be at some point getting pretty close to the end of the chamber and then having it protrude out the end, not being able to cock the gun. So I'm about where I want to be, and so I'm going to throw the 6 caps on here and we'll give her a try. Loaded 6. Let's see what happens here, and I'll put these in the target and we'll take a look. Well, fortunately, we got 6 shots out of the 6 shots I loaded, so that's good news. Boy, pretty impressed with this conical bullet. I got a little shaky, and don't know why, but I wasn't as stable as I was the first time around. Maybe I'm worried about the bullet falling out. I don't know. But the first 2 shots hit in exactly the same place. They are barely over the point of aim. We're at 50 feet, and yeah, pretty pleased with the way this conical shot out of here. Shot very, very well. So we'll try the paper cartridges next and have our last comparison today with the 1851 Navy and kind of see which one we like the best. Well, I took it apart, the pistol, the revolver here apart, ran a few swabs down the barrel. I did notice that a little more lead came through came out on the patches this time. That was something I did not notice at all with the round ball. So the conicals are leaving just a little bit of lead, not enough to be a problem or destroy accuracy or anything like that. Just something that I noted that there was some lead coming out on the patch. So next we're going to move to our paper cartridge, and these are the ones that we put in a package in the building a paper cartridge package video. And this would be exactly what you get or something very similar if you happen to walk into the hardware store back in the 1850s and want to pick up cartridges for your 51 Navy or your belt pistol. And so they would come pre-packaged in a package of 6, exactly the same way you would get them as a Civil War soldier. And so you get your package of 6 and have them already measured in the paper cartridge with the bullet on it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the ripcord here and see if we can't get this thing to open. So you just open that up, There we go. And we've got our 6 cartridges sitting right inside, ready to go. So let me dump one out. Put my revolver on half cock, and I'm going to set that cartridge right down inside the chamber, right down to the bullet, and then I can rotate that underneath the rammer and get that down. They ram just a little bit harder because you're cutting off not just lead, but also cutting off the paper and the glue that holds the paper and the bullet together. So I'm just going to pull out that extra paper that's stuck on the side here. Get most of that out of there. And grab another bullet and we'll do it again. So I didn't video every single chamber being loaded on these last 2 rounds because it's a longer and tedious process, but you can tell just by watching the first couple that I loaded and now working with a paper cartridge how much faster this goes. It actually is a very much quicker way to load a cap and ball revolver, and you had everything pre-measured and you could just drop it in, ram it home, and you were done. Alright, paper cartridge is all loaded, capped, and we're ready to go. So let's fire off another 6 rounds, see what the conical bullet held together with the powder in the paper cartridge does for us. So there's our last and final try. And looking at the steel target, it appears to me like we're opening up just a little bit when it comes to the size of our group. So our group's opened up a little bit with the paper. Just from this test, which I would have to repeat a few times to be absolutely certain, but just from this test, it looks like the conical bullet with the loose powder actually was more accurate than trying to blow it out of a paper cartridge. And but all of them worked. They all hit a target at 50 feet. The group isn't terrible. And one elbow on the bench as I'm shooting this. So yeah, pretty happy with any method. Obviously the paper cartridge is so much easier to load that it would almost makes it worth it just that way, and it's not that much less accurate. But our loose powder and then the conical bullet on top of that really seemed to do the trick. So thank you for watching. Thanks for coming. If you like the video, please hit the like button, and also subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. Certainly helps get the word out a little bit more on some historical firearms, and gets YouTube to promote this a little bit better. So hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time on Frontier Western Heritage. Thanks for coming.
Okay, stop.
All right, we're doing a sound check. And if any of you shoot competitively, start over. And maybe we ought to put in our earplugs. So I don't know if some of these slick